The system that AI resides in is highly connected, and we need to understand that in a connected world, AI is going to have enormous impact in every facet of our lives. There is an arc of history that always leads to a power law. So there is a power law or Pareto principle, it's otherwise known as the 80-20 rule. 20% of the marketplace is going to control 80% of the business, essentially. In the world that we live in, there are 7 companies that account for something more than 30% of the performance of the S&P 500. So if you don't own the Magnificent Seven, you probably have not benefited from great performance over the last 2 years. And that is remarkably important for people to understand, is that 493 companies have not done very much. The Magnificent Seven will continue to prosper because they have the largest pools of data. And because humans like to remove friction from their lives, they want simplicity above all else. Log in with Facebook, log in with Apple, log in with Google has meant that those corporations are the ones that intermediate your relationship with the world. Because we all forget our passwords, we all want to rely on that trusted intermediary. And if you want to have an app in the App Store, you have to go through Apple. You have to go with the rules and regulations. That means that there is a third party that sits between you and the open internet. There is the third party doctrine, which says that if you disclose information to a third party, you have no expectation of privacy, essentially. And so by installing the technocracy as the interface between users and corporations who sit in the App Store, there is a form of control that exists at government level. So we talk about 3 types of worlds that may exist in the future. What we know is that there is the surveillance state approach, which is characterized by the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the largest grouping of countries in the world, led by China and Russia. And that is a world of state surveillance, and you are in a social credit system. The second model is Western liberal democracies, that notionally you have freedom of speech and you have a right to privacy. However, when the third party doctrine comes in, you have this idea of surveillance capitalism, which has been written about by Shoshana Zuboff in her excellent book. And so you have surveillance states, surveillance capitalists, and the third way is what I call self-surveillance, which is being a self-sovereign, conscious agent. You own and control your data, and you choose with whom to share it, and you monetize it directly with those 490 corporations that are currently monetizing you. The root of the future is in something as simple as logging in and making life simple for people. And that's why AI is so compelling. That's why Google is so compelling. That is why people have fewer and fewer opinions of their own. And if they do have an opinion, it is now more likely to be a confirmation bias. That is to say, I have a view, I have a feeling, and then I go and find information that supports my argument. Well, imagine that on speed. That is AI. AI gives you the answer to the prompt that you prompt it with, and it cannot necessarily be relied upon to be accurate, and it will reflect the biases of the data sets. Are we entering into a world where we have misperceptions? we need to understand that we have the opportunity to free ourselves by owning our digital consciousness, the information that flows from us to digital systems that will feed the information omnivore and enable us to benefit according to our value. And our value relates not only to us as individuals, but us as members of communities. We are in a closed system whereby humans want to remove friction from all of their engagement with life, and that the servicers of that simplicity at the moment are the Magnificent Seven by virtue of their domination of the information space. And remember, what I in iPhone is supposed to be information, right? And what the I in IT that became, everyone talked about technology, but it was about information technology. If perceptions control behaviors, by corollary, misperceptions create misbehaviors. If you look at the social credit system, you can see how dangerous it is if the state controls your freedoms, and if the state controls the information that enables you to comprehend the world. Who are controlling your perceptions? I think that the way that we should think about the future is the benevolent approach, the non-dystopian approach. We have provided all of our life's information via our devices that have collected accurate information about us, and we have removed all fraud because all of our systems are able to verify that I am a single mother, I am a retired person over 65 years in age. So that would be the first step of a benevolent system that says all information is valuable, but the truth is priceless. If we could make sure that the inputs were correct, we would likely get correct outputs. And that means that we would eliminate fraud, waste, etc. And that this amazing AI system has enabled us to totally reshape the basics that we require. We know that there's enough water, land, etc. to provide us with our basic needs. All of that information where we're making mistakes would be eradicated, and we would therefore have clean water, healthy food, and sound practices. If we assume that the information is able to give us superpowers, and that superpower is that you have the ability to cohere information that you could never have got from your own experience, so much in the same way that Google gives you access to the world's information. Now, not only do you have access to the world's information, but you notionally have the ability to look at the aggregate of all information that is generated by all types of people with all types of preferences that are all feeding an all-knowing information system is going to help you to live a better life. So if you assume that the government is looking to enable you to live your best life, then how do you vote for that government? And then how do you comprehend the policies of that government? And how does that government interact with the corporations that currently own all of that information space? That's the real question. What I imagine and what I would like to believe is that we would regulate the corporations sufficiently that we could get more and more accurate perceptions. My fear is that they don't really have an incentive to give you more and more accurate perceptions, because their job is not to give you accurate perceptions. Their job, in the case of Meta, is to get you to buy more and more products from the 490 members of the S&P 500 that are selling you goods and services. If AI has outcompeted me and I don't have a job, then how do I buy goods and services from those 490 other corporations? If AI is going to take away the role of humans in generating value, what am I going to do in order that I can remain valuable in a world of AI superpowers that are not owned by me, they're owned by 7 corporations, and those 7 corporations have a mandate to sell advertising to the other corporations that exist, that I am supposed to be guided in terms of buying their goods and services, and I have to pay them with money, which is going to be in short supply if I'm not employed, will need to be guided by a government that would say, okay, we are likely to need a form of universal basic income. And that universal basic income needs to be sufficient to cover the core needs of every human. So that would be food, shelter, healthcare, education, and then some form of life meaning. So we can feed ourselves cheaply and healthily, then we have to accommodate ourselves. Historically, economies grew around port cities like London, Liverpool, or New York, and then they became financial centers, or they became manufacturing centers, et cetera, et cetera. So you no longer have the pressure on land in the same way as we did before. So there is less price pressure on everybody being in those centers. So we should see a deflation in land costs and much higher mobility. Now we have to look at healthcare. Healthcare is obviously a massive problem, but we know that it's not about the cost of providing the drugs or the services, etc. It is about the legal systems and regulatory systems that have sprung up in them. But if you're thinking about drug discovery, if you're thinking about all of the gene-related discoveries, imagine everyone's medical records being available for data and AI analysis. We will have massive breakthroughs, which we've already seen in the innovation we have at the moment. And bearing in mind that stress is one of the biggest killers of people, probably the largest stress is on how do I pay my bills? How do I live my life? You will see a lot less illness that is stress related. So we could be in what sounds like a utopian world. We've now got enough educational resources that we can be well educated, and we will be educated about things that would be probably a lot different than we are now. The premium on being a lawyer or on being an accountant or anything that could be done better with accurate input output models is going to go down inexorably. So we're not going to waste our time being educated in those sorts of ways. Education systems will be focused on wanting to be knowledgeable or wanting to be a good citizen, to be a good neighbor, to be interesting, to be funny, to be whatever it is. So food, shelter, education, healthcare. And then the question is, what am I going to do with all this free time? The nation state that I reside in is going to provide me with all of these wonderful benefits because they are that much cheaper and they are that much more efficient and much more effective. Then the question is, how does that nation state exist? You will look at your politicians and they will be scored against their promises and their performance. There will be a very clear manifesto of we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do the other. And you should be able to instruct the AIs to measure my local constituency politician against his manifesto promises and score it out of, let's say, 100 that says, oh, he's got 75% on this, he's got 25% on that, he's a liar, etc., etc. But I think what we will see is this efficiency across the board. So the real fundamental question is, how do we preserve democracy so that we can vote for great leaders who have our best interests at heart, that understand the systems and technology and are not going to be corrupted by corporate interests. And this is something that most people miss about the work of Adam Smith. He made famous this idea of the invisible hand, and the invisible hand most people think of as free markets, but he understood the invisible hand to be about the needs of the corporation and of profit seeking to control the government, to legislate for the benefit of the corporation over the individual. And we have seen this in extremis in what they call K Street in the US, where the lobbying groups, which represent every stripe of public interest, who are designed to inform politicians because politicians are time poor and focused predominantly on raising money and campaigning to stay in power. And so they outsource their policy making to experts. Where you will want to live will be the country that has the enabling architecture to be fairly taxed by the governments that enable them access to their citizenry, and that the citizens have every incentive to purchase products from them because they understand their corporate providers to be good citizens with good policies and engaging with the community. So we've been over what the utopian benevolent model of the corporate surveillance world might look like, or the technocratic world. Now we need to look at the surveillance state. China is a good example because they are very technologically focused. They have a technologically advanced social credit system in place. They already have digital currency, and they have complete control of the mobile phone through WeChat and Alipay and all of the other amazing technologies that they've given their people. There's two ways that it can go in societies that do not have representation at the individual level. You can have a benevolent dictatorship, which is well exemplified by Singapore, for example, where they had a fantastic leader. He made fantastic decisions and built a wonderful nation. If we switch back to the Chinese model, you really don't have availability of that information, which is why the Great Firewall of China is so effective, because they want to control the information diet of their populations. You have to do that if you are running a surveillance state. The question is whether President Xi, is trying to be the benevolent leader working for all people in China, or whether he is merely trying to remain in power and provide the optimal data set to retain power and grow that power. So these are really big macro questions. And there are people who I know in the UK and in the US who believe that Russia and China have better provision for their citizens than we do. Perceptions control behaviors. And if you're not the enemy of the state in China, you may well be very happy with the situation that surrounds you. As long as you're in compliance, I would have thought that the surveillance state will be equally capable to provide you with the same food, the same shelter, the same healthcare, the same education, and the same purpose as the West. So the only real difference is the engagement of the individual with the collective and how that is mediated, whether you get to see the information about whether you're being lied to or not.